Somewhere right now, you are staring at your phone, feeling a low hum of anxiety in your chest. You tell yourself you are relaxing, but you feel more exhausted after an hour of scrolling than after a full day of work. You blame your phone. You blame your boss. You blame yourself, dutifully, the way people blame themselves for things that are actually someone else's fault entirely. But the real story starts not in your screen time report. It starts 50,000 years ago in a landscape. And once you see it, you will never look at your own exhaustion the same way again.
Imagine your ancestor somewhere in the Paleolithic savannah 50,000 years ago. No job, no to-do list, no pending email. They hunted, gathered, raised children, and navigated a world of immediate physical threats. But they also possessed something you almost never experience: vast stretches of completely unstructured time. A famous 1968 study by anthropologist Richard Lee at the University of Toronto challenged everything we believed about work. Data collected back then suggested adults spent roughly 3 to 5 hours a day on actual subsistence activities. Researchers since then have debated his methodology, noting that food processing, childcare, and water carrying add hours he did not count. But even the most conservative revised estimates place total daily subsistence effort well below the modern 8-hour standard. The gap is real, and it is large. But here is the strangest part. Your ancestor may have spent less time working than you did yesterday. And what their brains did with all that leftover time is stranger than anything a self-help book has ever told you.
Picture a hunter sitting alone on a flat rock overlooking a valley. The morning hunt ended 2 hours ago. He has eaten, no predator is watching. He is doing nothing. At least that is what it would look like to you. But during that hour on the rock, he is replaying yesterday's chase, recalculating where the herds will be in 3 days, remembering which berries grew near the northern ridge last season, rehearsing a social conflict from last night's fire, and somewhere in the back of his mind, imagining a new kind of throwing tool he has not built yet.
This is what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a constellation of brain regions identified at Washington University that activates specifically when we stop focusing on an external task. The default mode network handles self-reflection, social modeling, memory consolidation, and long-range creative connection. It is not the brain's off switch. It is the brain's most sophisticated processing mode. Your ancestor on that rock was not wasting time. He was running the highest level software the human brain possesses, and that software requires the one thing the modern world is designed to eliminate.
The physical evidence of what unstructured time produced sits on the walls of caves across Europe and Asia. But the most fascinating proof comes from something that should not exist if our ancestors were purely focused on immediate survival: the atlatl. This spear-throwing device, documented at sites across multiple continents between 15,000 and 30,000 years ago, required its inventor to solve a problem that had no urgent daily application. A direct throw already killed animals. The atlatl doubled range and tripled impact force, but designing it demanded the kind of abstract, multi-step engineering that serves no purpose if you are thinking only about today's hunger.
It required someone to sit, think, experiment, fail, and think again, across multiple sessions with no immediate reward. That kind of cognition does not emerge from a brain running on deadline. It emerges from a brain that has been given room to wander. The same mental state that invented the atlatl 30,000 years ago is the one that helps you solve a problem in the shower or discover a story during a walk. The cave paintings of Lascaux, 37,000 years old, tell the same story. Nobody painted those animals because they were hungry. They painted them because unstructured time had opened a door in the human mind that has never fully closed.
This rhythm of work and rest built something that no productivity metric has ever learned to measure. Sharing a meal, sitting around a fire, telling stories in the dark, these were not leisure activities in our modern sense. They functioned as the connective tissue of survival itself. Human brains evolved to maintain deep, trust-based relationships with roughly 150 people and to sustain an inner circle of 5 to 15. This limit, calculated at the University of Oxford, requires something that cannot be scheduled or optimized. It requires unstructured, unpressured, face-to-face time, time that simply exists without an agenda. Your ancestor was not socializing inefficiently around that fire. They were doing biological maintenance on the very system that kept the group alive. But then came the trade. The modern world gave you 2,000 friends and eliminated the fire. That trade deserves closer examination than it has received. Then, 10,000 years ago, sapiens did something unprecedented. We stopped moving. We planted seeds, built walls, and invented the concept of a field that must be tended whether you feel like it or not. The Neolithic revolution usually gets described as humanity's greatest leap forward, the moment we traded the uncertainty of hunting for the stability of farming. Something became possible that had not been possible before, and something else became impossible that had been possible for 300,000 years before that. But the physical record tells a different story. When researchers at Ohio State University analyzed ancient skeletons across this transition, the bones told a grim story. Populations showed a measurable increase in bone stress markers, dental cavities, and signs of repetitive strain injury following the shift to farming, alongside a significant decrease in average stature. The body recorded the change. The cognitively varied, physically diverse life of the forager was replaced by monotonous, season-long labor over the same small patch of ground. The genes for human potential had not changed. The conditions that activated them had been switched off. Something had to replace the rhythm the savanna provided. The agricultural world provided subsistence. The industrial world provided clocks. When 19th century factories began running shifts measured in hours and minutes rather than in tasks completed, we broke our ancient relationship to time. Historian E.P. Thompson documented this shift in 1967. Before factories, a cobbler worked until the shoes were finished, and a farmer worked until the field was done. Time was a container for tasks. But under industrial capitalism, tasks became containers for time, units to be filled, measured, and sold. And that leads to something that should stop you cold. The modern workday was designed to keep your brain's highest-level software permanently switched off. This shift did not just rebuild our economies, it rebuilt our daily lives. Decades later, when screens entered the equation, we did not just sell our work hours, we began selling what remained of our rest. But it gets worse. A 2018 analysis of over 500,000 American adolescents showed that this transition has reached its breaking point. Increased screen time directly correlated with higher rates of depression and loneliness, while non-screen leisure time protected mental health. The ancient trade was now complete. We had replaced unstructured time with structured consumption and called it entertainment. Here is where the science becomes interesting and the culture becomes defensive. Decades of research on flow states at the University of Chicago suggest that the standard model of perpetual productivity actively degrades the brain systems that produce creativity, social depth, and meaning. Mainstream economics disputes this framing,
noting that industrialization dramatically extended lifespans, eliminated famine across most of the developed world, and lifted billions out of poverty. These are real wins. Nobody is suggesting we return to the savannah and abandon antibiotics, but we lost the default mode network's daily activation. We lost the fire. We lost the rock overlooking the valley. And we replaced all three with a notification that arrives every 8 minutes and calls itself connection.
We built a civilization so efficient that it quietly dismantled the very mental architecture that made us human, and then handed us a scrollable feed for the trouble. But here is the final paradox. The average modern worker actually has more nominal free hours than almost any generation before, and somehow feels none of them, because every one of those hours has already been sold to a screen before it arrives. The problem is not that we completely lost leisure. The problem is that we forgot how to use it. The exhaustion you feel on Sunday night does not represent weakness. It does not represent poor discipline. It represents a receipt, biological documentation that a brain engineered across 300,000 years of wandering, and sitting around fires found itself one ordinary Monday, staring at a calendar blocked from 7 in the morning until 8 at night, with no gap for the processing that kept our ancestors sane. You can begin reclaiming what the modern world removed. Protect a daily stretch of genuinely unscheduled time. Resist the reflex to fill silence with a screen. And treat your boredom as the signal it actually is, your brain requesting the mode it was built to run. The state of your mind does not represent fate. It represents feedback. 10,000 years of accumulated evidence that the world we built was optimized for output, and not for the creature doing the outputting. So I want to know, are you going to try to fight the system, or quietly carve out pockets of unstructured time and build the life your brain was actually designed for? Tell me which camp you are in. I read every comment.